Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Euractiv event, which is kindly supported by GIE, the Association of Gas Infrastructure Operators. My name is Frédéric Simon. I'm the Energy and Environment Editor of Euractiv, and I will have the pleasure of moderating today's event, titled Setting the EU on Track for Climate Neutrality, the Role of Gas Infrastructure. Today's debate on gas comes at a timely moment. Next week, the European Commission is expected to table a revision of its regulation on trans-European networks for energy. And the end objective is clear: to put Europe on track to reach climate neutrality by 2050. The question now, of course, is how to achieve this. What changes in infrastructure need to happen in order to ensure Europe does reach its climate neutrality goal? To discuss this topic today, let me welcome Antonio Lopez Nicolas, Deputy Head of Unit for Renewables and CCS Policy at the European Commission's DG Energy, Jens Geier, German MEP for the Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, Torben Brabo, President of GIE and CEO of the Gas TSO in Denmark, Ilaria Conti, Head of Gas at the Florence School of Regulation, and Giles Dixon, CEO of Wind Europe, the trade association. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. We will start with some short opening statements from each of the speakers, and then we'll move on to a Q&A debate, which will also include questions from the audience. To put a question to the panelists, just press the Ask function on Vimeo and write down your question. I will take some of them in the second half of this event. Now, I think that's all for me. So without further ado, Antonio Lopez Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Frédéric, for the introduction and for the today's timely event. I think indeed those are very important issues we have been discussed today in the context of the European Green Deal. Let me start by giving a few numbers to put things into perspective. The energy system is following a drastic change, a major revolution in the way towards climate neutrality. So there will be from here to be a major reduction of the energy consumption, 36% overall, 40% for the transport sector. We'll see electricity becoming the biggest part of the final energy consumption, from the current quarter of the final energy consumption to half. We'll see the power sector seeing a major transformation. I mean, doubling the renewable share by 2030, the current renewable share, and achieving close to 90% renewable share, 87% by 2050. And we'll see also the gas sector following a major transformation, with natural gas consumption being reduced by between 66 and 71%, and renewable and low carbon gases becoming 2/3 of the gaseous energy mix. So with all this information in mind, I mean, the Commission has tabled the energy system integration and hydrogen strategies last July to try to make our energy system fit for climate neutrality, an energy system that is responsible for 75% of the emissions. So we table a number of comprehensive actions across the three main pillars: energy efficiency, electrification, renewable and low carbon fuels, including gases for to decarbonize sectors, putting markets, integrated markets and infrastructure at the very center of the integrated energy system. And these, together with a specific focus on hydrogen, tabling a specific hydrogen strategy, which aims at turning hydrogen into a solution to support the energy system integration vision. A vision on which renewable hydrogen is the long-term priority of the EU. We want hydrogen to play a role in the context of the overall integrated energy system, being able to the decarbonization of the hard-to-decarbonize sectors, mostly industry and some parts of the transport sector, and recognizing different starting points in member states and conciliating the local production and consumption of hydrogen with the parallel deployment of the market rules for but also the integrated energy infrastructure that allows hydrogen to be transported within the EU. So we've done all this since July. Now we are busy in the different follow-up legislative actions and non-legislative actions in the Fit for 55 package that we will deliver next year, which I will be happy to comment later on. But I'll leave it at that for my initial statement.
Thanks, Antonio Lopez Nicolas. Let me turn now to Jens Geier.
Yes, good afternoon from Essen, my hometown. What is something like the German energy capital? We have the headquarters of E.ON, RWE, STEAG, Open Grid Europe, and some others. So when you make politics in this town, you cannot escape the topics that we are discussing this afternoon. I've been introduced as a member of the ITRE committee, and I have the honor to be the rapporteur for a non-legislative report on the Commission's hydrogen strategy. So the first statement coming from the Parliament is will be this one. So my report focuses on the role that hydrogen can play in decarbonizing Europe, underlining that this is not the silver bullet solution, but will be an appropriate solution for the hard-to-abate sectors we have. We are aiming to getting an economy based on clean hydrogen as soon as possible, what makes an increase of renewable energy necessary, and adapting the strategy of the Commission in a way that we can ramp up the demand, that we make hydrogen, green hydrogen, especially clean hydrogen, more competitive as soon as possible, and describing the role of natural gas as a transition technology that should be used not very long. So we should the other side is that we should come to usage of clean hydrogen as soon as possible.
Thank you, Jens Geier. Let me turn now to Torben Bravo.
Yes, thank you, Frederick, and thank you, everyone. It's good to be here. So in Gas Infrastructure Europe, we are ready to take our role in decarbonization. When looking back, we have for decades, let's say, been very close between politicians wanting to have a change on security of supply, markets, sustainability, and the end users who are paying the bill. So we are normally situated here, and we are used to it. We feel comfortable here. I think that we can reach the 2030 and 50 targets. We can assist with our infrastructure to assist the Commission and the policymakers. We also think it's important to remember the end users asking for minimal transition cost, and that's where infrastructure becomes even more interesting. The European Commission strategies we really like. We think they are really good for us. We don't need that many iterations to go, let's say, to action, because we also on the other side see that we are under a tremendous time pressure. So if I should come with 4 specific, let's say, areas where we are assessing and have positions on, it's, let's say, the push for renewables. So we would really like to see more wind, sun, and biomethane, and from wind to hydrogen coming on, in parallel with also, let's say, a demand target where you, let's say, increase the consumption of gas. So renewables pushed and demanded, that's the first one. The second one is the infrastructure, because we see in all analysis that infrastructure reduces the cost, and the choice of energy carrier be it electricity, natural gas, or hydrogen, and the mix of those makes the transition even cheaper. And there again, gas infrastructure plays a very important role, be it transmission, storage, or LNG. Latest studies also indicate that by retrofitting existing natural gas pipelines into hydrogen pipelines makes the transition even more cheap. So push for renewables and infrastructure in place. It should not be, let's say, uncoordinated. So we really believe in network planning. We think that the ENSOs, T1DPs, they are great work starting from. Please include hydrogen in the future ones, and consider to also have regional level and national level included. So we have, let's say, joint power and gas analysis on the infrastructure, because that's where the savings are. And it's also stimulating sector coupling. So a push for renewables and demand side, infrastructure in place, and then network planning. And then the last topic we're assessing, that's for sure markets. We have very refined and good, well-functioning, deep markets on electricity and natural gas today. We should take the best of those and take it into the future. A new component there should be the guarantees of origin. We really see that the guarantees of origin is a key component if it's made right. So we should have a guarantees of origin on, let's say, multiple fuels, multiple colors, be it gray, blue, turquoise, yellow, or green, with a preference over time for green for sure. And the guarantees of origin should be used across sectors, from electricity to gas to hydrogen. Over time, you should store it. And you should also seek, let's say, perhaps more granulated guarantees of origin on hourly ways. So markets, let's say, the key for us. I think that will end the first introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Torben. Let me turn now to Ilaria Conti from the Florence School of Regulation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Frederick, for the invitation. Indeed, what we are discussing today is a very relevant topic. We've been discussing in Europe for a few years now about the importance of reaching climate neutrality. We have ambitious targets, as we heard also from Antonio just earlier on. Sector integration and particularly infrastructure integration is definitely an important pillar of the pace towards the path towards climate neutrality. In fact, it's one of the main pillars of the energy system integration strategy. And even in a recent debate, one of our most important debates in Florence School, it emerged as probably one of the key pillars to be addressed. If we are planning to reach climate neutrality, we heard that, of course, electrification will play a primary role, but we will also have to address how to develop the market uptake of what are called at the moment clean molecules. And clean molecules means, of course, hydrogen, but also biogas, biomethane. So when we turn to discussing about gas infrastructure to support the achievement of climate neutrality, we have to focus on both the existing infrastructure, existing pipelines, storage sites, LNG terminals, how to repurpose, to retrofit, how they can contribute to have a new role in the future, and also, of course, the development of new infrastructure, for example, for hydrogen. And there's a whole new thread now, research on innovation and how technologies can help the development of infrastructure in this sense. So it's true, we are on the eve of an energy revolution, and there are many different issues to tackle concerning infrastructure. And also this revolution has to happen at least cost for consumers, as also Torben just reminded us, and I fully agree. So that's where there is also a precise role for regulators to make sure that that this revolution happens without too many disruptions, without, let's say, by avoiding to be locked in some choices, and also if we have to consider, for example, the development of a hydrogen infrastructure for Europe, hydrogen backbone as it is called, then there might be the features for a natural monopoly there to emerge. And in this sense, regulation should play a role in that. But mainly to make sure that the transition, the choices in this energy transition are not too costly for the European citizens. And I'll stop here.
Thanks, Ilaria, for sharing those initial thoughts. And let me turn now to Giles Dixon from Wind Europe.
Thank you very much indeed, Frederick. Thank you for inviting the European wind industry to take part in this very important discussion. Wind is 15% of all of the electricity that we consume in Europe today. And according to the European Commission's scenarios for 2050, it will be 50% of all of our electricity in the decarbonised energy system. The first priority of the European wind industry is to support the direct electrification of as much of the energy system that can be electrified directly. Antonio has talked of taking the share of electricity in the energy mix up from less than 1/4 to 1/2 by 2050. The wind industry actually thinks we can go beyond 50%. We can get to 62% electrification in the energy mix by 2050. But that still leaves 38% of energy consumption which we cannot electrify, the so-called hard-to-abate sectors. And as part of a decarbonized economy, we want as much as possible of that 38% to be running on renewables. We think that renewable hydrogen is very promising and that it can and should play an important part within that other 30%, 38% of the energy system. Within the shift towards hydrogen, we want as much as possible of renewable hydrogen, and renewable hydrogen will be cost competitive with other forms of hydrogen by 2030 because of the advances in electrolyzer size and technology and the further continuing cost reductions in the production of renewables. So yes, there will be significant amounts of renewable hydrogen in the energy system. And of course, that renewable hydrogen needs to be transported from the point of supply to the point of demand. Now, the question that immediately arises is it transported as renewable electrons or as renewable molecules? Where do you do the electrolysis? And how far is it transported as electrons? And how far is it transported as molecules? The wind industry is open-minded on this question of where to do the electrolysis, whether it's close to the point of production or close to the point of demand. We think these decisions will be taken on a case-by-case basis, depending on geography, the volumes involved, and the existing available infrastructure. It is clear to us that some gas infrastructure is going to be needed for this transport of renewable hydrogen, and we look forward very much to working with the gas TSOs on this. It is clear to us also that there will need to be some investments in the repurposing of existing gas infrastructure so that natural gas pipelines can carry 100% pure hydrogen. But at the same time, and this is my final point, there will need to continue to be massive investments in electricity infrastructure as well, not least because of our starting point, the increased share of electricity in the energy mix rising from less than 1/4 to over 1/2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giles. So we can get the debate started now. And let me begin with a question to you, Torben Bravo. Looking at the current state of play in Europe today, how much renewable or low carbon gas do we have in the system today? And how does that translate when it comes to the infrastructure that we have in place at the moment? Do you see change already happening in the way infrastructure is being upgraded to carry these new types of gas?
Yes, I can guarantee that. Looking back, let's say 10 years ago, when we assessed the TYNDPs at that point, there was nothing about renewable gases at all. And if we go 4 years back, all of us thought that everything could be electrified. So I think by sitting here today and hearing Giles saying that, let's say, 1/3 to, let's say, half might be needed in something else than electricity, be it molecules, is fairly new evidence for all of us. And that means that we are not, let's say, prepared from the gas sector side to give you a precise answer to this. But we very positive development over the last 6 to 8 years. A lot within biomethane, which is the existing one. If you look at Northwestern Europe, you have hundreds of biomethane production facilities. In my own country, Denmark, we have now reached more than 25% of biomethane, naturally coming from subsidies, because we need to make a transition very short, but we have shown that the infrastructure could be a change. We have shown that the existing market rules could be, let's say, copy-pasted for biomethane, and now we are assessing where to go next, and that is for sure for hydrogen. And you all have read the European Hydrogen Backbone Study, which is Western European TSOs assessing that we could have around 7,000 kilometers needed of hydrogen pipelines in 2030. Of this, approximately 75 retrofitting, 25% new ones, with cost savings of, let's say, half or 90% of if you constructed new gas infrastructure. And also have in mind that the most mature country, let's say Netherlands, is already, let's say, actually doing this. They are actually retrofitting natural gas pipelines, and they have a plan for, let's say, hundreds of kilometers. And if you add all the member states having hydrogen strategies, I guess you within the next 3-4 half years will see a lot of new development on the infrastructure. A last thing I could say is that in GIE, we are now assessing how we will take storages and the LNG terminals into the future. How can we change them to adapt to the need for hydrogen? We have already assessed and made public how they can be used for biomethane, which is fairly easy because it's methane, very comparable to natural gas. But we also assess how we can, let's say, bring those two infrastructure components into function in 2030 and beyond on hydrogen as a starter.
Thank you, Torben. Maybe one reflection about what Antonio Lopez Nicolas said in his introduction. According to the Commission's 2030 climate target plan, the consumption of gas, natural gas at least, by 2030 is expected to decline by 25%. Now, what are the consequences of this in terms of the infrastructure?
So we believe also that natural gas demand will decline, and we need to see a greening of the natural gas supply, because our consumers, the end users, the biggest industries need renewable energy to make their products renewable so they can be sold in Europe on a global scale. So we are a believer in this. 25%, let's say, that's manageable. It means that we don't need that much new natural gas or methane infrastructure, but it also means that, let's say, by good network planning, we can now include more biomethane, and we can also prepare the planning for conversion of natural gas infrastructure today used, which could be used, let's say, in 2030 and beyond for hydrogen. We have not done this assessment, but I think that, let's say, that direction in declining natural gas demand fits perfectly into the transition from natural gas to biomethane and renewable hydrogen. So I think it's fine for us. Please have in mind that the transition goes in different pace. So Netherlands are already there. Their 2030-40 vision for all of Europe, they have it now, 2022. And if you go more and more to Eastern Europe, they will rely on natural gas, and they can convert heavy fuel oil and coal to natural gas. But also because the electricity networks are not, let's say, developed to include all the, let's say, intermittent renewable or sun. So it will take longer for Eastern Europe to transform, meaning that natural gas should have a longer role also for Eastern Europe beyond 2030 and 40. Thank you.
Thanks, Torben. Bravo. Let me turn now to Antonio Lopez. Nicholas, question for you. You said the Commission wants to stimulate demand and supply for low carbon gases like hydrogen. That was the main objective of the hydrogen strategy that was presented earlier this year. So what does that mean in terms of the infrastructure? Because it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. I mean, you can't put the cart before the horse. You need to have infrastructure in place first if you are going to get some of these hydrogen gases through. So how does the Commission approach this?
Yeah, I think the Commission, I think in the strategy takes phase approach to that. So we do believe that a full value chain approach is needed to upscale hydrogen. So it's supply and demand, but it's also infrastructure markets. It's making research and innovation contribute and paying due attention to the international dimension. So we are trying to look all across the board to hydrogen. So we see things moving in us towards more local production and consumption of hydrogen, in decarbonizing existing hydrogen uses, mostly in industry. I mean, that's the first phase of our roadmap until 2024. Then in this period, we also see the regulation that we need for markets and for infrastructure, or at least the first part of it being tabled, so that it's ready for the second phase after 2024, where we will upscale hydrogen to other hard to decarbonize sectors, where production will multiply of renewable hydrogen will multiply by 10 in 2030 compared to the target we have for 2024. A sequential approach where we build on different steps, where we take due account of different national realities, because not all member states have the same ambitions, and not all member states have the same ideas on how to promote hydrogen. So this needs to be taken into account, and we also need to be careful when doing all these things, because at the end of the day, it's a new market that we want to create for renewable and low carbon gases. If we want those gases to play a key role in achieving climate neutrality. So we need to do it cost effectively in the context of the wider energy system. And we need to do things in such a way that we learn by doing, and we don't create barriers already at an early stage by making the wrong choices. So I think that's a progressive approach, what we do.
Thank you. Maybe a follow-up question regarding the 10E regulation that the European Commission is preparing to table next week. Obviously, you can't reveal any details of this at this stage, but maybe you can say very generally if, according to the Commission's own projections, gas consumption will have to decrease by 25% by 2030. So does that mean the Commission expects the gas infrastructure to be 25% smaller as well, or do you see synergies in some places?
Yeah, I mean, first thing is that, I mean, as you correctly flag, Frederica, we need to be cautious. I mean, it would be a bit imprudent that I speak in detail about the 10E while it's being adopted by the Commission College. But generally, I mean, a few reflections on that. Of course, there is no one-to-one relationship. I think you need to look at the other things in the context of an integrated energy system, as I said before, trying to look at the system as a whole across sectors and energy carriers. I think that's something extremely important to do. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make our infrastructure ready and fit for achieving climate neutrality. Is a key enabler in the road towards climate neutrality. So we need to tackle that and ensure it's fully consistent with the Green Deal and bring together the different energy carriers and the different sectors. We need to do it at all levels. I mean, from distribution to transmission. That all new players are part of the system, and we need to ensure that the planning is done in a cross sectoral way, so that we can deliver an optimal outcome. In our view, any longer about looking at sectors, at planning of infrastructure in the different sectors independently, on has been done in the cooperation of electricity and gas, and extend it forward and do it in an even closer way to try to achieve the infrastructure that we need to achieve climate neutrality.
And final question, is that integrated planning happening in a way that you believe is satisfactory for the moment? How maybe does the Commission plan to encourage further integrated planning in the future?
Yeah, the answer is complex to give in that regard. At the energy system, I think it's a system which is changing very quickly, and thanks to the increased renewables energy efficiency, thanks to digitalization. So the energy system is changing really quickly. So I think in infrastructure planning needs to adapt, and it's adapting to that. And I think what we are looking out in that context now is, I mean, to make sure that with the new reviews, to ensure that this is the case. I mean, we are looking at the 10E regulation as you flagged before, but we are also looking at other pieces of legislation which are very important for renewable and low carbon gases, and also for infrastructure, and which are being tabled next year with the Fit for 55 package, and those are the renewables, the review of the renewables directive, which will look at the promotion of renewable and low carbon gases, at issues such as terminology and certification of renewable and low carbon gases, which is a major important element to allow for the upscaling of the market for renewable and low carbon gases. We will be looking also at the gas side, at the current gas legislation, to make sure that it's fully compatible with the Green Deal, and allow for the uptake of renewable and low carbon gases, including hydrogen. So all this is together with the pieces of legislation that go beyond the scope of what DG Energy is living on, will form the basis of the future system. And here I'm talking about elements such as the ETS, which is extremely important, the Energy Taxation Directive, and so on and so forth. So there are many elements that are important into the vision we are delivering, and that's what we've tried to do in the 2 strategies I referred before, and we're trying to ensure in the follow-up that this is coordinated in the right way.
Thanks, Antonio Lopez. Nicolas, let me turn to you, Jens Geier. A few thoughts from your side on the 10E regulation, which the Commission is preparing to publish next week. You're in charge of this report on the hydrogen in the European Parliament. How do you believe this regulation should start planning ahead for transporting new forms of gas like hydrogen?
Yes, it is one of the tools that the Commission and the European Union can use in order to support the development for a hydrogen network, and that will be strongly supported by the European Parliament. In the past, we had a lot of conflicts inside the European Parliament when it came to the question to what extent is European public money, the money of the budget, used to support infrastructure for fossil fuels. And that conflict will surely come up again if the Commission plans to enlarge the infrastructure for natural gas or other fossil fuels. That is easy to predict. So I would strongly advise the Commission to support only infrastructure that is ready for the transport of clean hydrogen, and can be used meanwhile also for other gases. I mean, that would take a lot of potential for conflict out of the discussion for the 10E regulation. Beside that, I think that in building up the famous backbone, that 10E can play a crucial role. I would support an idea that is not covered by my report, but is obvious, that we create supporting infrastructure for a backbone of gas stations for hydrogen that is used in heavy lorry transport. And beside that, we should have a rather pragmatic approach to the question of infrastructure. So I support the idea of the Commission about the building up of hydrogen islands in the beginning. That is not necessarily to be supported by the 10E, but is already running. So in my constituency here is Duisburg, and Steag and ThyssenKrupp Steel just announced a cooperation for building a huge electrolyzer in Duisburg to support the steel factory of ThyssenKrupp Steel in Duisburg-Hamburg. So there is already something existing and or developing, and the role of the Netherlands was rightly mentioned. That is not so far from where I live. So Rotterdam will play an important role here, I guess, and connecting the German developing network to the British, to the Dutch one, is something what is definitely the second step. So looking at the demand side is important. The role of the regional specific solutions and strengthening the power to gas potentials in distribution networks. I think that's the starting point, and probably 10E can play a role here, but it will not be a major one.
Thank you, Jens Geier. Let me put a question to you now, Ilaria Conti. As an academic, I suppose you've been following with interest the projections that the Commission has put forward for 2050, for 2030, when it comes to reaching net zero emissions and put the European Union on track to do that. How much of the gas transmission system currently in place do you believe will still be relevant in 10 years' time? Do you believe gas operators should start making plans now to scale down?
Okay, sure. It's of course, yes. The simple answer is yes. We've been following the work of the Commission in view of reaching the climate objectives with big interest. We have a number of research projects ongoing in FSR, and they don't only look at, let's say, the infrastructure side, which is the topic for today, but we are also looking at, let's say, the market aspects, because we know that a healthy energy system has both components that need to be addressed carefully. So, for example, when I referred to our poll earlier on, which saw the infrastructure as one of the main pillars of the energy system integration strategy, on the other hand, we had let's say, a lot of questions saying, okay, but infrastructure is definitely important, but what do you do with a pipeline where there is no gas flowing in? And this is an evergreen question, evergreen topic, which a question we already had to ask regarding natural gas pipelines. So the same might happen if we decide to opt for the building of hydrogen, huge infrastructure, huge pipelines, without making sure that we look at demand. But as previous speakers already said, this is something which has to be addressed and is being addressed also, I think, quite substantially in the plans of the European Commission. On our side, we think that, in answering to your question, gas is going to definitely play a role in the future, in 2030 and up to 2050, clearly. We will see, as also Torben already said, a shrinking of natural gas volumes. That's clear. On the other hand, we will see more and more decarbonized molecules concurring to building this decarbonized energy system. As to facilitate the market uptake, we believe that guarantees of origin could be a good instrument, and on this aspect also we have been working quite a lot in Florence School. We have organized some events, and we are about to release a paper where we propose a sort of upgrade of the existing guarantees of origin. The way they are right now, we think that they could be upgraded to become really like a common currency, which could connect different vectors in the energy system. So we would have one instrument connecting renewable electricity, renewable gas, and hydrogen in particular. Renewable hydrogen, at the same time facilitating the achievement of the renewable target of in energy consumption in the, let's say, in the most cost-effective way. So.
Ilaria Conte, you maybe saw the question which is coming from the audience. You mentioned guarantees of origin being some sort of currency. If the carbon content, and that's a question coming from Konstantin Levoyanis, I suppose. He says,
I suppose too, but I cannot see the question, sorry.
Okay, well, it's showing on screen. So it says, if the carbon content of energy carriers is the new currency of the energy system, then why not reflect the CO2 content in hydrogen guarantees of origin? He asks. Is that one of the questions that you've been exploring at the Florence School of Regulation?
Yes, let's say it's one of the questions we very often get, because indeed those who carefully listen to our proposal understand and realize that what we are proposing is in fact a similar mechanism to the ETS. But on the other hand, we do not, we distinguish, I think, quite clearly between the fact that the system we propose aims at reaching the another target. So of the three, let's say, climate targets, so energy efficiency, carbon abatement, and increasing the share of energy consumption coming from renewable sources, we focus on the third. So we distinguish between achieving, and actually we build our own proposal and the mathematics supporting it based on achieving this target and not the carbon abatement one, because we think that the two targets should be kept separate, because there are some types of renewable energy that do not necessarily can classify as renewable energy, but they're not necessarily CO2 free. And therefore there is a separate system which is quite working, and it's the ETS. And we think that because they aim at achieving different targets, also the instruments should be separate. This doesn't imply that there shouldn't be a link, and in fact we know that guarantees of origin in their current form, they are already fit to vehicle any type of information. So at the moment there is a number of information about the energy they refer to, the sources, but nothing impedes to include also information, additional information on linked, for example, to CO2 emissions reduction. This is of course possible.
Thank you, Ilaria. Let me turn to Giles Dixon now with a question on hydrogen. Looking at the synergies between gas and electricity, and looking at the wind sector, of course, I mean, what is it all about? Is it mainly about placing electrolyzers and hydrogen storage tanks next to wind farms? And is there today some reliable estimate of what infrastructure needs to be put in place in order to make this work?
Yes, so in many cases, Frederick, it will be a case of putting hydrogen infrastructure, the electrolyzers, critically close to wind farms, next to wind farms. In other cases, the electrolyzers may be closer to the point of demand and consumption. What's happening in practice today is that individual projects are going forward with different solutions. I mean, just to give you a few examples, and here Gaia may be familiar with this first one, the GET H2 Nucleus project in northern Germany, which is going to take onshore wind from wind farms in Niedersachsen, electrolyze next door to those onshore wind farms, and carry renewable hydrogen 130 kilometers in a fully converted natural gas pipeline that will carry only renewable hydrogen down to the Ruhr, where those renewable molecules will power an Evonik chemicals factory and a BP refinery. And that's onshore wind producing for renewable hydrogen. Then there are many cases of offshore wind developments. Shell and Eneco are building an offshore wind farm, 700 megawatts in the Netherlands. It'll be operational by 2023, and part of the production will fire a 200 megawatt electrolyzer hub in the port of Rotterdam. Ørsted are working with the world's largest fertilizer manufacturer, Yara, on green ammonia in the Netherlands, taking electricity from Ørsted's offshore wind farms, and many other such initiatives are underway. And in each case, you know, the developers and the companies involved in the project take the sensible decision, given the parameters and the economics of the project, on where to do the electrolysis. If I could just make two observations, Frederick, please, in response to what others have said. Some people say that we need to exempt renewable hydrogen from grid tariffs, and that way renewable hydrogen will become cost competitive with other forms of hydrogen. Now, one can understand that argument, but we must absolutely avoid removing grid tariffs for renewable hydrogen, but not at the same time also removing grid tariffs for renewable electricity. Because if we only remove them for renewable hydrogen, we create an unlevel playing field, and that would be fundamentally wrong. Secondly, I fully agree with what Torben and Ilaria have said about guarantees of origin. All forms of renewable energy consumption, whether it's as electricity or hydrogen, need to be traceable. They need guarantees of origin. Yes, the Renewable Energy Directive will probably need to be amended in order to make this work for renewable hydrogen. Actually, the relevant article of that directive needs to be amended anyway, because as currently drafted, it allows member states, if they wish, to say to renewables producers, if you are receiving from public financial support for your assets, then you cannot have guarantees of origin. And clearly that's a complete nonsense and needs to be removed anyway in next year's revision of the Renewables Directive. Antonio, even before you set about thinking how to amend that directive for renewable hydrogen. Could I, Fred, abuse my position by putting a question to another panelist, notably to Torben? It'd be really interesting to hear from you, Torben, on the technology developments and the cost outlook for both the retrofitting and, more importantly, the repurposing of existing gas infrastructure. And I'm particularly interested to hear what you have to say about the outlook for the development of compressor stations. Thank you.
Torben.
Yes.
So a few thoughts on the question asked by Giles. Yes.
Sure. That's why Giles is so good to have in a panel. He has a lot of clever questions. So I will not go, let's say, into details for the, let's say, specific projects, but I will be, let's say, in general terms. As I said, it's a new business for us, so we are starting up, and when we are doing this, we are doing it the right way. So when we will retrofit, it will be, let's say, secure to do it, and we can, let's say, technically operate it, etc. So many of the studies, let's say 2-3 years old, and they have done it in the Netherlands. They are considering in Netherlands and Germany, and their experiences says that it will reduce the cost, let's say, from 50 to 90%, also for the compressor stations. It depends on where you are specifically in the system. And it's not to avoid your question, but the answer is, let's say, very, let's say, complex. Because right now we see probably 200 plus projects going on where there is an involvement of storage or transmission. And most of these projects, they are different in composition because they come, let's say, on a point-to-point scale and want to interact with our system, meaning that let's say, the cost for changing will have, let's say, a large variation. And we hope, let's say, that the next year's analysis and inclusion of hydrogen in the TYNDP can put, let's say, a broader view on the transition for, let's say, natural gases into hydrogen. So we have some very lucky ones where you have, let's say, wind and consumption very close to storages. There you could very cheaply include storage and serve flexibility balancing and storage purposes to the hydrogen value chain. And then in other places, for instance, around the North Sea, where you have the wind several hundred kilometers from the shore, you need to transport it in, and the consumption sites is perhaps not in the, let's say, in the good sandy beaches area, but there, let's say, 20, 50 kilometers inland, and there you have a different, let's say, cost structure. So, Giles, I will promise you that in the next year we will conduct joint studies with you, hopefully, where you can raise all the questions, and then we can try to find the answers as soon as possible. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Torben. I look forward to it.
Giles, there's a question from the audience for you. It's coming from Mike Parr. He's an energy consultant. He's pointing out that there are projects currently being launched by Iberdrola in Spain to have electrolyzers that he says will produce green hydrogen at a price which is close to grey hydrogen. And he's asking for your thoughts on this.
Okay, Iberdrola are doing some very interesting things on hydrogen. They have created a new joint venture company called Iberlyzer, which is working on electrolysis. In Spain, initially their focus is on producing renewable hydrogen from solar PV rather than from wind, but they want to produce it from both in due course. Yes, indeed, they're making the same sort of statements on the relative costs of renewable hydrogen to other forms of hydrogen that all the large companies involved in this are doing. Ørsted are saying, yeah, 2.2 euros per kilogram by 2030 for renewable hydrogen. And in fact, I've even heard Hydrogen Europe say that that is a conservative estimate. So the costs of renewable hydrogen are falling rapidly, that is clear.
Thank you, Giles. Let me turn back to you, Tobin Bravo, with a question about gas infrastructure and how it should be regulated in the future to take account growing amounts, hopefully, of hydrogen that will be coming to the market. And there's a question which is maybe a little bit academic, but gas infrastructure today, it's a regulated asset. In that sense, it's kind of protected from competition. With new hydrogen-related assets, electrolyzers, or maybe storage facilities for hydrogen, what kind of status should they have under EU law? Do you think there's an overhaul there which is needed to take account of that? Because they can be either or they can be considered a generation asset, they can be considered a storage asset. What are your views there?
Yes, perhaps I'll start a different place from some of the questions you asked earlier, because right now we are not legally allowed to work on hydrogen. In most countries, it's not part of, let's say, the regulation for gases. So TSOs and infrastructure owners are doing this, let's say, on a voluntary basis, because we believe there will be a change in the regulation. But I think even to the Commission and to everyone, please push the Commission and legislators and regulators to open up for this. We have a lot of member states where the regulators say, no, you cannot go into this sandbox or pilot or study because you're not allowed to work on hydrogen. So right now, with the chicken and egg, we have a lock-in. Most infrastructure owners are on their own faith and will, on their own economy, starting to invest into this, and then it will end in some kind of regulation. Coming back to the question direct, we see multiple projects, 200 plus, as I said, and they fall in different categories. Some is, let's say, having a plan for scaling up. Even though they start in 100 megawatt, they're already saying 1 giga or 2 giga in different locations. So we can see a category in Northwestern Europe, particularly, and probably also Spain, Italy, that very soon could have a European hydrogen backbone need, and means that we could copy paste the existing regulation, because you will have large scale transmission and storage and use of terminals. And then we will have, let's say, two categories, which is, let's say, lower than what we call, let's say, normally regulated transmission or storage entities. You will have, let's say, islands where they live, let's say, in circular economy setups, where you will have, let's say, clusters where you have a direct line point to point, which is, let's say, perhaps not that regulated. So our, let's say, proposal for regulators and to the Commission is to have, let's say, a dynamic regulation which is open for 2, 3, 4 different categories of pathways forward. If we don't have that, it will be a more expensive transition. And then one of two of those, they will have the scale and they will be similar to what we see on a natural monopoly using the existing infrastructure, and they should have, let's say, a regulation close to us. Coming to electrolyzers, if that was, let's say, the direct question, that's, let's say, an open question. Right now, we prefer to have, let's say, development of all I've said until now. And then for, let's say, electrolyzers, we really don't know where this will end. Right now, we don't have any of the, let's say, sites or any of the technologies that we're discussing. I just saw that the largest being, let's say, planned now is 20 megawatt, and we're talking about, let's say, 40 to 80 gigawatt. So we have, let's say, nothing of the scale and magnitude to consider. Is it, let's say, essential facilities at the natural monopoly? How should it be regulated? So I think from a GIE perspective, I think, again, the regulators and the Commission should start with an open approach. They should allow more, let's say, entities, more, let's say, providers of these services than in a very mature market, because hydrogen and production and transmission consumption is not mature right now. And then they could make the regulation that perhaps, let's say, more entities, including TSOs, could go into power to X. And then after 10 years, there is, let's say, a warning, there will be a re-regulation. And then let's wait and see what kind of regulation we need at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Torben. Maybe Ilaria Conti, you can share a few thoughts about the status, the legal status, as you see it, of hydrogen infrastructure in the future, whether it's storage or whether they're electrolyzers. Should they be considered as gas infrastructure, or do you believe maybe a special new category should be created for them?
Thank you for the question. I was smiling earlier on because this is really the question, capital Q, something that we are also planning to address more and more in the upcoming weeks and months. Of course, the big question is whether the same principles, the funding principles of European energy policy applying to the gas markets, of course, so far can be simply transferred. Doesn't matter if we are talking about different types of gas, but the principles are the same and regulation should be applied without any change. This is probably the biggest question, and but as we study more and more, we see that there are clearly some differences between natural gas and this new variety of gases, and perhaps it's not really, let's say, urgent or even necessary to put into question the funding principles, the pillars of the whole European energy policy. But certainly, I agree that we should look at the future energy system with an open mind, and therefore reflecting a bit on also if let's say the market conditions are the same that we have today compared to the same market conditions when the first energy policy decisions were taken, or if there are differences. Clearly, the situation is due to change radically, and we heard that different actors in the market see the future in a different way. We know that there is a clear distinction between what are called the hydrogen valleys. So let's say in hydrogen valleys, meaning development of infrastructure to transport hydrogen only at local level, therefore connecting, for example, some specific industrial sites. And therefore, this picture would be extremely different from having a hydrogen backbone crossing all member states, or most of the member states in Europe, as Torben also already mentioned. And so the implications would be completely different. And for storage, it's again it deserves again another separate reflection. In principles, we will discuss also within Florence School. At the moment, we do not have anything published, but as I said, we are going to research more and more on this to decide whether, for example, hydrogen deserves a specific regulation or if it doesn't. That's as simple as that. But there are many, many implications.
Thank you, Ilaria. Let me put the question now to you, Antonio Lopez Nicolas. What is the current thinking at the European Commission when it comes to future hydrogen infrastructure like electrolyzers or storage facilities? What kind of regulatory approach is needed for them? And what is your current thinking at the Commission?
Yeah, I think as said before, I think this is very much the subject of what we are trying to do with our current impact assessments, both for 10E but also for the 21 pieces of legislation. I mean, there we are trying to precisely to look at how hydrogen can be enshrined into the existing regulatory framework, whether there is a need for changes in some of the elements concerning the approach we've taken. As you know, I mean, the Commission has said more than once that we see, I think, a role for electrolyzers as being a market activity being provided while the system operators dealing with the pipelines. So these are the sort of things we will be looking at in the context of our impact assessment, as said. If you allow me to pick up on one of the previous issues that other speakers have highlighted on guarantees of origin and the role of guarantees of origin into the overall renewable and low carbon gases. I think this is indeed one point of the work we are trying to undertake in our upcoming impact assessments, in particular the one on the review of the Renewable Energy Directive. And there, what we are trying to do is to try to look at a system that covers all renewable and low carbon fuels. So this includes gases and hydrogen, but also fuels at large. We are looking at a system that can include emissions across the life cycle, so that we can compare the different fuels, the different gases, and then we can make a choice, and users can decide what to support or what to trade inside member states, but across borders as well. Member states can decide what to support. So this is something we are trying to do. Indeed, the guarantees of origin are an important part of this reflection, and we will try to look at this so that we can deliver this comprehensive certification system as announced in the hydrogen and system integration strategies.
Antonio, thank you for that. There was a question coming from the audience. Maybe you saw it appearing on screen. It's about
no. If you can repeat, because I cannot see anything. Yeah.
Yes. So a question coming from the audience: how could you justify that low carbon and hence potentially fossil hydrogen is regulated under the Renewable Energy Directive?
Yeah, I think the answer is rather simple. I think the renewable includes already a number of low carbon options. So it's not only renewables or what's covered there. It's a directive that promotes renewable energy but other type of fuels that are covered into the renewables directive. For example, there is waste heat. There is also recycled carbon fuels already covered in the current RED II, in the current renewable directive being transposed by member states. The key question there is, for example, when you take the issue of certification. So what you need to have is a level playing field, a system where renewable and low carbon fuels have the same parameters, and you can compare both categories and the different types of low carbon fuels between each other and also with renewables. So this in itself, I think, justifies that the system, for example, is in the same of legislation rather than having separate systems for renewable and low carbon fuels that can create divergences and can endanger the level playing field we have. Because at the end of the day, I mean, while renewables is the final goal, it's clear that low carbon fuels will play a role in the transition and will support the final goal of decarbonisation and moving to a renewables based energy system.
Thank you, Antonio. I think, unfortunately, we're reaching the end of this session. I will ask, before we close, each one of you to say in a few words maybe the main message that you would like our audience to take home with them. And maybe we can start with you, Giles Dixon.
Sorry, I was muted. I would like to raise three issues that haven't featured in our discussion today. First is the water footprint of electrolysis. We need to keep a very close eye on that. Second, how do we use the heat that is generated from electrolyzers? And third, where do we all stand on this issue of, is this renewable hydrogen produced and transported within Europe, or are we still entertaining the interesting idea of importing renewable hydrogen from outside of Europe, with the exception perhaps of Ukraine, which has a very unique place in EU external relations and external energy relations. The wind industry does not see a case for importing renewable hydrogen from further afield outside Europe. To do so would be extremely costly, and it would undermine the huge job creation and GDP creation potential that comes from developing further Europe's renewables industries and Europe's renewable hydrogen industries. Thank you.
Thank you, Giles. Ilaria Conti, a few concluding thoughts from your end.
Yeah, just a very simple statement. The importance of infrastructure in supporting the achievement of carbon neutrality is undiscussed. Similarly is the market uptake. So in order to achieve the vision of the energy system integration strategy, it's very important to facilitate the market uptake of clean molecules. In order to achieve this at a sustainable cost, we have to start from what we have in terms of infrastructure, looking at what we have and see if it's possible to make good use of existing gas pipelines, storage sites, and so on and so forth, as to support a least cost transition to a carbon neutral economy.
Thank you, Ilaria. Tobin Bravo, maybe a few thoughts now from you to conclude this conversation.
Sure. I can start agreeing with Ilaria and Giles. I agree with the issue they rose. We are here at Gas Infrastructure Europe. We are in fact operators today of 4,000 terawatt hours annually. We have the competence, we have the knowledge, we even have the assets, and most of those assets could play the cheapest alternative in decarbonizing to blue and green hydrogen in the future. There needs to be a change in the regulation. What we see, the trend, that's very positive, but we also, let's say, want to have, let's say, focus on the speed, because if we need to deliver, or if we should deliver, we need exponentially speed, and we don't see that right now, to be honest. But a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Torben. Jens Geyer, a few concluding thoughts from you.
Yes, I would largely support Mr. Bravo on what he just said and said beforehand. Also, this is one of the basics of my report here. Speed is crucial, so what is crucial also to speed up hydrogen economy in the EU is that we have a market regulation, and we believe, given what Ms. Conti and the Florence School will find out on their research, but we believe that the gas market regulatory framework and the clean energy package could be a starting point, a blueprint for a new hydrogen market regulation, and that is needed in order to make things going. And when speed is crucial, then let's be very fast on that market regulation.
Thanks. And to conclude, Antonio Lopez Nicolas.
I think the challenge to achieve climate neutrality is huge. If we want to achieve 55% emission reductions by 2030 and 38 to 40 renewables, 36 to 37 energy efficiency, I think we need to do things in the right way. We need to take a whole system approach if we want to decarbonize cost effectively. I think this is extremely important. And I think the different options discussed today are crucial for decarbonization, and they need to go hand in hand. Renewable and hydrogen and renewable and low carbon gases need to go hand in hand with energy efficiency and with additional renewable electricity and with fit for purpose market and infrastructure. And I think those things are extremely key if we want to achieve what we want at the cost and at the speed and in the way we want to do it, reaping all benefits of the European Green Deal for Europe in terms of decarbonization, growth, jobs, and industrial leadership.
Thank you, Antonio Lopez Nicolas. I think this wraps up today's event. Thanks again to our panelists for taking the time to speak to us today. Thanks to our viewers for watching this event, and to GIE for supporting it. If you missed the beginning of this event, well, don't worry. In a few minutes, the full recording will be posted on YouTube and on the events page of Euractiv. We also have more virtual events planned for next year, so take a look at events.euractiv.com for more detail. I think that's it for now. Enjoy the rest of the day, stay safe, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.